Hello, everyone. Welcome to RSP podcast with me, Rajan Palmer. I'm here with adventurer John Horsfall. How you doing, man? Thank you for coming on.
No worries. Well, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
How's things at the moment then? You keeping yourself busy? What are you doing during lockdown?
Funny enough, before lockdown, I was actually out in Switzerland, and literally Switzerland got absolutely hit hard by it just before the UK did.
Mm.
I came back to the UK having had the virus, and then spent 3 months in lockdown, out in the country, which was because I've sort of been traveling for the last 3 years. So it was actually rather nice to spend a bit of time with the family, relax. But yeah, it was kind of a not scary, but an interesting time.
No, definitely. But you said you actually had the virus then. What did it feel like? Because
I was one of the lucky ones who probably had it quite mildly.
Okay.
So it was sort of 36 hours of a pretty bad headache and shortness of breath, and then I lost my sense of taste and smell for about 2 or 3 weeks after.
Oh, really? That lasted that long? God, that must.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I didn't actually know I had lost it, which was really strange for about sort of 3 or 4 days, and then I got a message from a friend. He was like, "By any chance, have you lost your sense of taste and smell?" And I was like, no, I don't think so. Anyway, I went and sort of smelled like fairy liquid, couldn't smell it, tried to smell, and it was kind of funny because I got back to London, and I was drinking the water, being like, God, London's water's changed so much. It's so clean. But I couldn't taste anything, so I was just tasting, nothing.
Yeah.
And then I was getting while I was sort of isolating in London, I was getting sort of spicy chicken sandwiches from Sainsbury's and being like, oh my God, this is the most bland food I have ever had. It's Sainsbury's like going downhill or something. What's going on? Clocking that I had lost my sense of taste or smell at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it must be a kind of a weird thing it's something that's kind of, I guess, so constantly there that you don't even think about it when you've lost it, right?
No, exactly.
Oh, it's a weird time. It's just a weird time in general. But then we'll forget about that for now and go back to happier memories of travel. So, like I say, I've been following your page for a while. I think I started when you started cycling from London to Central Asia. Is that right? And you've also done marathons in Kenya. I can see you're an adventure athlete. But let's just start off sort of your background, where you come from, how you got into traveling.
Well, I suppose growing up, my father was based abroad, so we used to always go out and see him. And, we were very lucky. We used to have our sort of, one holiday a year, and we used to sort of plan it and decide which part of the world we would go to. And then I sort of always felt I had this sort of adventurous side in me. But, of course, it's slightly growing up, you have it slightly dampened down of, the sort of constraints of get a job, do this, do that.
Your world.
I sort of tried that, but then after I'd graduated from university, I was like, I had this idea to cycle across America. It literally came out of the blue in my head. I think actually it sort of started with the idea of traveling by bike a very long way. Like I think it was from like London to India. And then I was like, actually, no, I really want to go to the States. I really want to do that. And then it was like, do I go around it? And anyway, I was like, no, I really want to go to New York and I really want to go to San Francisco. So let's go from New York to San Francisco. Anyway, in my mind at the time, I was like, well, this is the stupidest idea you've ever had. So I sort of put it in the back of my head. And then I was sort of taking a break, as one might say, a little sort of gap year from university before I started work, and I just was like, actually, you know what? I'm probably never get a chance again to do this. I'm going to go for it. And anyway, sort of came back, started planning the journey, and I did my research, and sort of came back, told the family, of which they were like, "Oh my God, what?" And anyway, I 6 weeks later, I booked the ticket and was on my way. I didn't own a bike. I bought a bike, did a tiny bit of research, packed it up, and landed in New York. And it just happened that at that exact time, it was in 2012, the summer of 2012, and New York, I landed, and it was like just under 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was like, my God, it's so hot. I thought, I didn't think it was going to be this hot. And for some unknown reason, it was like that the whole way. And I was sort of meant to be traveling from New York to St. Louis and down that way. And St. Louis didn't like go below 100 degrees for like 16 days.
Wow.
And so I headed up north to like Chicago from New York, and to Pittsburgh, then to Chicago. And even then it was like, 36 degrees centigrade, 102, 103 Fahrenheit. And I remember like on the third day, she's like, my God, I thought I was quite fit. Why am I just exhausted in this, cycling? And then I looked at the temperature and I was like, oh my God, this is mental. What's going on?
Oh, that's insane.
All the amount of research that I had done and sort of said, the average temperature for June or July is 27 or 28 degrees. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty bearable. That's like a very warm summer's day in the UK. I'm happy with that. That's fine. But for some reason, they went through some sort of horrific dust bowl and like horrific storms as well. All part of this sort of experience and the challenge, and I absolutely loved it.
So how long did you spend out there? Because honestly, that sounds awesome. Just cycling all over the States, it looks beautiful.
Yeah. 2 months.
2 months. And did you end up going from New York to San Francisco?
Well, when I got towards California, there was no sort of like hostels or anything available. So I went north towards Sebastopol, quite near Napa Valley, and ended up finishing it in Bottega Bay.
Oh, lovely.
Which is about an hour's north. And some family friends were living in Sebastopol, so I was staying with them.
Cool. And then, so how often, on average, how long were you cycling for a day?
Pretty much all the time.
Oh.
I sort of wild camped, so I had a really small 1-person tent, which I'm 6'3".
Oh, that is tall.
And I couldn't really fit in it.
Yeah.
And it's about half a meter off the ground. It is minuscule, and so I used to just sleep, in fields on the side of the road, sort of doing that, and then I just get up. I would cycle for 2 or 3 hours, go and have breakfast, whether that's in a local cafe or some porridge that I bought in like the supermarket, and cycle pretty much all day till lunch, have a bit of a 2-hour break, and then cycle on. And I was at the start, I was sort of covering 70 or 80 miles, and then by the end of the trip, I was covering sort of 120, 110, 100 miles a day.
Wow, that's insane. That's insane. You must have, you must have stopped off and met some sort of amazing people on the way. Did anyone sort of question you? Why are you cycling all the way? This is America. We drive everywhere.
Well, this was the thing what was sort of funny was, I was going from point A to point B in my mind. So in my mind, it was perfectly normal. But of course, if you meet someone in like Pittsburgh, and then you say, where are you going? And you go, oh, I'm going to San Francisco. They're like, oh, my God. Sort of like us meeting someone here, and you're going, oh, so where are you cycling to? Thinking they're just maybe going down the road. And they're going, oh, I'm just heading off to Moscow.
Yeah.
And you're sort of like, oh, yeah, that's kind of... And so in your mind, it's perfectly normal. But to everyone you meet, it's slightly nuts. And one thing I actually picked up on while I was doing that was just like how generous the American people were, because I would be one thing about traveling on your own is that you are slightly vulnerable, but people are very inclined to help you out, and they're very intrigued by you. Especially someone dressed in 4 massive panniers on your bike and dressed in lycra, which is just not a good look at all. So when you sort of walk into these, American bars in the middle of the Midwest, and they're like, who is this guy?
Yeah, I guess it must be so weird for them as well. And I think you are right as well about what you say about like when you're traveling on your own that people are more willing to help you, because it's either like I always find is that you can kind of see that, you either get, for example, you meet someone who was a traveler themselves when they were younger, and they kind of see you themselves in you, or they're people who they wish they traveled like you yourself, and they just want to be part of your journey in any way that they can.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I have a million stories of like times when just for like one, when I was in Pennsylvania, and like for me, I'd never been to the States before I did it, and so I was only going on what people said. And this is another thing about sort of traveling is it sort of opens your mind to different places. So when I said I was going to Pennsylvania, I was like, oh God, Pennsylvania is really dangerous. And then you'd be like, oh, why is it so dangerous? Like, yeah, there's so much crime and everything. You'll be like, oh, well, have you ever been? And they're like, well, no, I've never been. I've just heard. And Pennsylvania, like, they couldn't have been nicer. Like, everywhere I went, they were like, being like, people would always be trying to say, oh, come and stay with us. Come and stay with us. Can come and have dinner with me. Come and do this. And, on my first time going from like New York to Princeton, which is New Jersey, I was there, and I sort of was like, okay, New York to Princeton. Oh, Princeton's a university town. So I just finished uni. And so I was like, oh, sweet. I'll go to Princeton and check it out. It should be fine. And so I covered sort of 70 miles a day. I was absolutely exhausted. And I'd sort of done research saying, oh, you can probably just, pitch a tent on someone's lawn. You just go knock on their door. And anyway, I sort of went into a restaurant, got some pasta for the evening, and then a cop came in. And so I asked him, and he was like, no, man, you can't go around knocking on people's doors. Otherwise, they're just going to call the police, and then I'm going to have to come pick you up. There is one hotel in the town. I was like, oh, okay. Well, how much is the hotel? And it's like, yeah, it's $300 a night. And I was like, oh my God, it's not like I budgeted that.
Might as well just not tell you.
and anyway, at that exact point, the waiter behind the bar said, oh, I might be able to help you out if you want to stay. And at this point, it's like 7 o'clock, and I'm thinking, oh God, he's going to be on shift till about 12. It's going to be trying to stay awake. And then luckily he finished at 9, and then he said, oh, head towards this address. And anyway, he was there with his parents. His parents were like, hi, John, we've made up a bed for you, come and stay, And then in the morning, fed me and said, look, if you're going along this way, we have this contact to help you out if you need.
Nice.
So, and then the next night, or the next day, cycled on. I think I was heading over a bridge again, exhausted, and nearly crashed into another cyclist, of which at that point he was like, God, where are you going? And I was like, well, I'm heading towards like Motel 9. And he's like, very funny. You think Motel 6? I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm not really sure. And he was like, oh, well, my girlfriend's out of town. And, do you want to come back and have dinner and stay the night with me? And I was like, well, all right.
Yeah.
And so, all the way, and this happened all the time. And so it was really strange because you don't, on day-to-day life in the UK, it doesn't really happen. And it happens now and again when you travel, but very rarely like on a continuous basis.
Yeah, very much so. That's quite interesting. And a lot of people say like, I think a lot of people wouldn't expect that from the United States as well, actually.
No, exactly. And as I say, I'd be in a cafe and, as I got in, everyone would be like, oh, so what are you doing? And then I'd tell them what I was doing. And they'd be like, oh, that's so cool. And then they'd carry on their meal. They would leave. And then when I asked for the bill, they'd be like, don't worry, I was taken care of by that couple who
really?
Who left. And I was like, what's going on? Like, this is nuts.
Oh, that's so nice, isn't it? Isn't it? That's so nice that like they just paid for it and left as well. Like, do you know what I mean? They didn't even acknowledge, like they didn't acknowledge that they'd done something which has stuck with you for such a long time as well.
Yeah, it's just this sort of incredible generosity, all the way throughout.
Yeah. I mean, what were your favorite parts of the States as well? Because I know, like, I mean, I haven't been to the States since I was very young now, and I went with my family and stuff. But a lot of people always say to me that, someone from Nebraska is very different from someone from New York. They say it's literally just like a continent. Well, I mean, I guess it is, right? It is a continent of really different people and different places. What would you say was your favorite part, some parts of the United States?
Well, it's really difficult, but yeah, when I say California is like a different country to the
Yeah.
United States, it really is. You literally cross the state line, and you're like, because I crossed it in South Lake Tahoe, and South Lake Tahoe is sort of in Nevada and California, and on the Nevada side, it was like these sort of concrete, tower blocks. And then as soon as you cross state line, it's sort of like these nice wooden huts. And then you suddenly cross over South Lake Tahoe, the mountains, then down into California. And it's like wonderful fruit huts next to the road. It's like really beautiful. And like the people are completely different. But all the way along, I mean, every state's different and has its own sort of unique charm, but very much so California is like a different country in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest sort of are on a par or very similar, but yeah, California and the rest of the states, there was very big contrast when I crossed over.
Yeah. What would you say was the most beautiful state, like nature wise, the ones that you would have cycled through? Because I mean, there's some stunning national parks out there.
Yeah, so I would probably go sort of Wyoming.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, Wyoming was interesting because it's completely. I mean, it's got the population of maybe let's say, Harrow
Yeah.
in the entire of Great Britain. Let's say it's like a population. I think it's a population of 200,000 in a country the size of Great Britain.
Yeah. Okay. So a very like sparsely populated place, right?
Yeah, so you cycle for about 70 miles. And like when you see on the side of the road, you've got, London, Birmingham,
Yeah.
Derby or something, let's say. And it's like, London's 20 miles, Birmingham's 123, and Derby's 200, let's say.
Hmm.
Suddenly you'll be like, oh, okay, well, London's the next big place. So, that's 20 miles away. And then you get 20 miles to what will be a place. Let's say it's called Muddy Gap. And you get to this place called Muddy Gap, and you'll be like, it's a petrol station. And then you'll get to the next signpost, and it'll be like, oh, Jeffrey City is 45 miles away. And you'll be like, oh, thank God. Okay, there's a city I can sort of stock up on water, and then you'll get to Jeffrey City, and then Jeffrey City will be completely deserted, and like there's only 30 people and one bar in the city. And so I found it really sort of interesting that way. And so but what I loved, it was just so natural, and there was barely anyone around. And also, like when I was in Jeffrey City, you'd bump into someone, and then they'd be like, oh, don't go that way to Salt Lake City, go that way to Jackson Hole. It's far nicer. So you're just bumping into people, and I'd be like, oh yeah, why not? I'll go Jackson Hole. It's only an extra 200 miles out of my way, but and so they'd sort of just pinpoint you to sort of different places.
Yeah. That's so awesome as well. Like it sounds like a really fun adventure actually. Now that you put it in my mind, that's something I'd love to do that. I'd love to get on a bike and go across America.
Yeah.
Did you? But when you were cycling, were you just cycling on the side of the highways, or were there cycle paths and things?
Oh, I did by mistake go on a freeway, realizing much to the annoyance of a few truck drivers and one very angry old lady who, when I pulled over, decided to follow me into the petrol station to tell me off.
Oh, she was not happy.
She was not impressed. But the thing is that when you're in when you're in the desert, there's only like one road.
Yeah, I guess.
And so you can't, and although you won't see a car, it'll be the only road, so it can be quite difficult at times. And there are like set maps of which cyclists usually cross, but I was very much like, oh, I want to go from New York to Pittsburgh to Chicago to this place. So I wasn't following like a well trodden or well well trodden route in terms of cyclists.
Yeah.
You gave, a very particular route, which is along Kansas. I was just sort of waking up each morning and being like, oh, that looks about 70 or 100 miles away. Let's aim for that today and see how we get on.
Yeah, perfect. Just seeing how it goes, really, right?
Yeah.
That's like that's the best way to do it, isn't it? Like, not following that set route. But so is that why you wanted to get into the cycling of, is this where the idea to cycle to Central Asia came from?
It very much so. It was trying to take that sort of, because when I went across America, I had no sort of idea, no expectation. And so it was trying to sort of recreate that because in Europe, sort of see how I sort of progressed and got on. And so the idea was to try and take it on to a more extreme level where I decided to try and do the whole thing without any money.
Wow.
Other than paying for my ferry crossing, which was prepaid, everything else was like no money. I would just rely on.
I'm guessing accept visas though as well.
No, because it was only getting into Asia. It wasn't.
Okay. Oh, okay, I see.
Oh, did I? Oh, yeah, of course. I'd need one for Turkey. Yes, and Turkey's visa. That's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, other from that, the whole idea was to try and do the whole trip without any money, and it sort of started off okay. But getting through France was fine. But of course, when you're cycling 100 kilometers every day, you are burning like excessive calories, and you usually, if you've ever done a big cycle, all you are is constantly hungry.
Yeah.
You are starving yourself. It's incredibly challenging in that respect, and so after sort of France, what was great was there's a cycling app where people can like apply, and cyclists will put you up and help you out and give you food.
Okay.
But of course, when you're on someone else's dinner or supper or whatnot, it's very much what they eat.
Yeah.
They haven't cycled 100 kilometers and maybe they've done absolutely nothing and not very hungry, so
yeah,
just be like, oh, well, here's a couple of potatoes and a few lentils, and you'll be like, thank you. But then you'd go to bed absolutely starved.
Yeah.
And what I found was it was actually, once I got through France, which I can speak quite well, not very well, but at the time, okay. When I got into Italy, I was like, oh my God, I actually know no Italian. And that's where I think it became incredibly challenging, was that you can't communicate. In America, speaking English was very easy, and you could build rapport with people and sort of get by. And people were very interested because you can easily communicate what you're doing. Whereas across Italy and France, it was actually really difficult. And people didn't quite get what I was doing. And it was to try and show the sort of kindness of strangers that I experienced in America, in France, and in Europe. You cannot speak the language and you can't build rapport. It's incredibly difficult to sort of, for strangers to be kind to you in that respect. And so after like 21 days, I was literally starving myself, of almost insanity. And on day 23, I had to call an end to it because I'd gone 55 hours without eating any sort of whole foods.
Oh, that's insane. Yeah.
And I was cycling up the Italian Alps, starving and like completely destroying myself. And the whole sort of idea of kindness to strangers wasn't really working. And so I'd sort of resorted to stealing, which it sounds...
You're joking. I can't believe that. What did you steal?
I was stealing like apples from farmers, and I'd wake up in the morning, and luckily I was going along like fruit fields, so I'd sort of hide and then eat, go and grab a whole load of apples and survive. And so and while I was sort of documenting my journeys, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, it looks amazing! It looks amazing." I was there just like really struggling because I couldn't eat, and I don't know, like the whole sort of expression of hungry or hangry, like when you're really hungry and angry. And so I was starving myself to the point of like complete insanity, where I was cycling along and just being like, how do I end this trip? How do I end it without quitting? To the point where I was like, maybe a car could just hit me and just knock me off. If I break a leg, that's fine.
Honorable discharge.
But then I can happily call an end and be like, I tried, it failed. But then for some unbeknown reason, my bike wheel, with all the weight, the wheel started collapsing.
Yeah. And
so I'd sort of planned for every eventuality of what could go wrong on the trip, tires, inner tubes, good pump, everything, it was all there. But the only thing I hadn't really planned for is if my wheel breaks. I didn't think about it. I was like, it'll be fine. It lasted last time. And so I had to buy a new wheel. And at that point, everyone was like, well, you could carry it on. I was like, well, no, I've sort of failed because I've had to buy an entirely new wheel on the top of, the Italian Alps. And the whole sort of concept didn't really work at all, because while it was meant to be sort of interacting with people, because if you have no money, you can't go to bars, you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to cafes, people hang out and have, time to talk. So it's very difficult to sort of interact with people, and so you start isolating yourself. You don't. The whole point is that you have to be friendly to get money, but completely the opposite happened of what I was trying to achieve. I became like more and more isolated, and it just became, as I say, a complete non-starter.
So then what happened? Did you continue on then, or did you go home?
I continued on to Turkey and then into Asia, but I started spending like food and doing it that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, the effect it had on me, like mentally, was just unreal, and it took me about 6 months to properly recover from it, because it was funny because I did my trip in Kenya, and like physically I was a wreck after my run in Kenya. Like I'd got shin splints in both legs. I'd had food poisoning. I was running like a marathon while I had food poisoning to try and get a target of completing it in a month. But mentally, like, I was completely there and I was enjoying it. And although it was really tough, I was sort of enjoying it. Whereas completely opposite happened. Whereas physically, cycling 100 kilometers in an entire day is very doable. But mentally, I was absolutely hating it.
Yeah.
And the interactions were very sort of what's the word? There weren't as many as there were in America, so it wasn't as enjoyable. It was an incredible landscape, and Italy is an incredibly beautiful country. And what was interesting was it was actually the Albanians who were the most hospitable and the most friendly out of all of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what did you cycle all the way through Albania then? But I suppose actually just going back on your point of what you said is that I think that's like really right as well. And I think even though like you said you have people on social media and stuff saying, oh, look how beautiful this is, look at what you're doing. Like the thing is sometimes they're just not there. And if you don't, and sometimes when you're traveling and it gets you down, it really gets you down, and it's so hard to pick yourself back up sometimes.
Oh, completely. And this was what was really difficult was because it was difficult to sort of put on it was hard to sort of show it because I was trying to sort of tell the sort of story of how great traveling is and meeting people. And so, I felt very lucky that I had decided to quit my job and sort of do this. And then I was sort of absolutely hating it. And so I was like trying to sort of encourage people to sort of venture out of their comfort zone to sort of pursue adventure. And there I was doing it and not really enjoying it that much.
Yeah.
which made it really, really difficult. And of course, anyone who looks at the photos from that trip will be like, wow, what a trip. It just looks amazing. And everyone who came back said, they look great. But this is why I have a slight issue was it didn't give a full reflection of what I was feeling and the actual reality of it.
Yeah.
And of course, as I'm sure social media can be a very what's the word?
Misleading.
Yeah, misleading is probably a good word to use.
Yeah.
Misleading, and people see the pictures, but the reality of I like taking good pictures. That's what I enjoy, and I like putting good pictures up. But the reality is that me in the side of the street sleeping in sort of some of the places sleeping were horrific, but it sort of didn't give a full accurate description of what it was.
Well, I mean, to be honest, have you ever thought about writing a book? Because you've got a lot of adventures, you got a lot of stories. Like, this is a big good thing as well. What you're saying as well, because it's saying it's not like traveling. Sometimes it's not all fun.
Yeah.
Have you thought about it?
Well, I sort of just write blogs. So I always try and when I do my trips to sort of keep a daily journal.
Yeah.
And then sort of put it up. So my America and European and Kenya trip are up on the website on a daily basis. So people can, read about, America was very sort of long and descriptive.
Yeah.
Whereas Kenya and the European trip were very much more like just very short and, did this, did that. This is what happened. This is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have thought about it, but I sort of felt it was probably better to sort of have it as more of a diary or a journal.
Yeah. Well, maybe think about it in the future when you get a little bit older and you start hanging your hat down. Think about it, because I think you've got some really interesting places, and I'm just looking at your Instagram now, some really awesome places. So let's go on to your trip in Kenya that you've been talking about. And is this as well? You sent me a picture with two soldiers as well. Is this in Kenya?
Yes, that was in Kenya. That was probably around sort of day 25.
Yeah.
And so I'd sort of been through the worst. I don't know if you can see from that picture, but around my legs there's probably a few bandages.
Yeah, a couple of bandages. So what were you doing out there? So you were running marathons, right? 27 marathons in 32 days.
Yeah.
That's insanity. What made you want to do that? Well, it's insanity, but it's awesome as well.
Yeah, I'd probably get close to insanity. Well, it's a really strange one, but I sort of had idea in sort of 2015 that I really wanted to get into running. And like I'm quite sort of sporty and this, but I've never really enjoyed running that much. And so I sort of signed up, I think in 2016 for a half marathon, and then was going to do a ultra marathon. I did the half marathon, and I was like, that was pretty brutal. And I did it completely quite injured. I was sort of having problems with my knee at the time. But I was like, I can walk. And so if I can walk, I can probably, get through a half marathon. Anyway, injuries didn't really help. But then I think in sort of April, my sister said, I'm thinking of going out to Kenya. Would you like to come? And at the time, I was thinking about doing like a running trip. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? I might just plan my running trip in Kenya.
Yeah.
And so, like my trip across America, I just pick one point and another point and go, right, I'll just do that. I will go from A to B and I'll see what happens along the way. And that's pretty much what happened. So I sort of planned it out. And then bizarrely at the time, I was sort of planning to leave my job again. This was before. And I got another job. And just as I was about to resign, like one of my dream jobs came in. And they were like, would you like to come and work for us? And I was like, well, yes. Bit of an issue. I planned a trip for 2 months or 6 weeks to go and do this run for a charity. Would it be all right? And anyway, they were really kind. And they were like, yeah, come for a month. Get settled in, and then you go away and do your trip, and then when you come back, you can get going. So I went out and I started on the Ugandan border, and then from there I sort of started running. And of course, when you're training and I was living in London at the time, and when you're training for like a marathon, you go for runs in the park, you go runs on the side of the road, etc. But of course, Kenya's not like London. And when you sort of plan out, I could eat there, I could eat here, like in that village or this village, again, it's quite difficult because you start and it's all, especially at the top in sort of around Mount Elgon where I started, it was just mud road and mud huts.
Yeah.
That village that I saw on Google Maps, which I thought I could stop for at a restaurant to have some food, was actually just a hut with some avocados and some bananas. And so again, I was sort of struggling to eat. And it became really difficult. And then I think on like day 4 or 5, I started to get a bit of pain in my leg or left leg. And then, but I rested up for a day or two. And then the next day I ran and then kept running. And then on day 13, I got food poisoning. Because I was staying with a family and they were like, you've got to come to this restaurant. It's the best restaurant in the entire town. And it's our favorite. And we always go as a special treat. And, when you're running a marathon after marathon, you're hungry, so you'll eat anything. It was like, it's called a nyama choma, which I think is like barbecued meat in Kenya.
Nice. Sounds nice.
Which was delicious. But it's not, health and safety is not the strong point. And, there's sort of chickens running across your feet before they're killed. And, all the meat sort of hung up outside. Anyway, I was like violently sick afterwards. But I sort of had the urge to carry on. And so even with food poisoning, I sort of just got, and this was the thing, it's a lot of it, it's all mental. Because I think if I had food poisoning now and someone's like, do you want to come on a run? I'd be like, no, I'm feeling so ill. This is just awful. I'll probably be about a week before I can do anything. Whereas like at the time, because my mind was just like, you have to keep going no matter what. And so I sort of got up and started running. Well, I say running, I was like hobbling and walking and just trying to sort of keep going.
Just covering as much distance as you can with as little effort as you can.
And then I was staying with a friend of someone who had put me up earlier. And I got there that day and I was so ill and I was throwing up at night. And in the morning, I just said, look, I am so sorry. Is there any chance I could just stay another night just to rest up? I am so ill. And they were very kind and said yes. And then the next day, I had to run up an escarpment. But again, it was complete lack of food. And I was really struggling. And then I think on about halfway, about day 16, 17, I just remember being like at my lowest. Like I was just ready to quit. I wasn't even halfway. Nairobi was the halfway point.
Yeah.
And I just remember just being like, right, I've just got to keep going. And I met a friend in Nairobi who, and we went out for like what I still to this day think is probably the best restaurant in the world. I can't remember what it was. It was like Japanese food and it was like soup and noodles and everything. And I had like a massive meal. And the next day I woke up and then ran another marathon and I was like, oh, I'm feeling much better now.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I sort of did that. And and to sort of give an idea of what had happened was I stayed with him before I flew up and I'd met all his friends. And then 2 weeks later, I arrived at his door to one of his friends going, can I help you? Who are you? I'd lost so much weight that she didn't even recognize me.
Jesus, wow, that's insane. And I guess, some people listening to this might think, what is he doing running across Kenya and stuff? But it must be such a beautiful and different way to see such an amazing looking country. Just seeing it on eye level, passing through the villages, it must have been an amazing thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I suppose what I was trying to do was just try and show a different side of some of these countries. You know, a lot of these countries have a lot of bad press, and everyone thinks of them as terrifying places to go.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to show was just sort of kindness of strangers, the kindness of people, and just like realistically, when you travel, 99% or probably 99.99% of people you meet will be good.
Yeah.
Just you go into the street today, most people are good people. And that now and again you do get a bad apple. And you will hear about the bad apple. What you will rarely hear about is the 99%. And so I was trying to sort of show that sort of side of, the people who are just going out of their way to help me out and try and promote Kenya as this amazing country and destination. Because I absolutely love it. And, it was all genuine. It was all what I absolutely love. And I think it's, if not one of my favorite countries in the world.
Really, I know. I can imagine it looks really, really stunning. It looks so beautiful. I mean, and the wildlife as well. Did you get any troubles with wildlife while you were running around?
So that picture, because in order to go from Nairobi to the coast, you have to cross the national park, the Tsavo Park.
Sorry, which national park?
Was that?
What was the name of the national park? Sorry, I think it cut out for a bit.
The Tsavo.
The Tsavo National Park. Okay.
And so everyone's sort of saying, how are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And of course, I hadn't really planned it. So I just woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning one morning and decided to run across the road because there's a main road that goes through the park. Anyway, I'd sort of woken up and after about 3 hours, I was jogging along to when this 4x4 pulls up next to me and just like winds down the window with like these two guys just staring at me, just going, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm just running down towards, Mombasa. And they're like, you can't do this. this is a national park. There's wild animals right next door. And I was like, yeah, but I mean, there's cars going past all the time. If there was a problem, they're like, I'm really sorry, you cannot get in the van. And so they sort of said, and I was like, how am I going to do it? And they're like, well, you're going to have to be escorted. And so the next day I sort of got up and they go, we've got an escort for you. So, they're going to be there with you the whole time all across. And so they started driving all the way through the park. And I was like, whoa, stop. What are you doing? They're like, well, we're taking you across the park. And I was like, no, I want to run through the park.
Yeah.
And they're like, really? Yeah. Anyway, so I felt really bad because park rangers had to be in a 4x4 behind me as I jogged along.
Just crawling. Yeah.
Just like crawling at like 5 miles an hour or something horrifically slow. And while I was running and, and sort of the heat of the day.
Yeah.
And then eventually we got through the main bit of the park and they're like, okay, we're fine now.
Yeah.
And that picture was taken at the end of the day where I sort of thanked them and for their service and, they let me go on my way.
Yeah, I mean, like Kenyan people in general, just super friendly. Because I mean, all the Kenyan people I've met in the UK, they're so friendly people.
I mean, they couldn't be nicer.
Yeah.
They were super friendly, super welcoming, and they're always encouraging you to their country because it is just absolutely breathtaking. And in the Masai Mara and Tsavo, it's just wild. It's these enormous national parks where there isn't much around, and it's the sort of last battle of just nature. These sort of parks, which one has to sort of try and protect for as long as possible. And unfortunately, the only way to do that is through hospitality and tourism.
Yeah,
that's what keeps it going.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think this is like, I mean, this is just a massive debating conservation and how to protect these wild areas in general is that, it's very easy for us in the UK to say, we need to protect these areas, we need to look after the wildlife because we killed all our wildlife and cut down all our forests and, our nature areas a very long time ago. So we could develop. So it's a very hard question, and I hope that they can really find a balance that works for the local people and the animals themselves.
Yeah, it's really, really challenging sort of question because it's not black and white as a lot of people in the Western world think of, like, oh, they shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
A lot of these people have to go to school and, would you send your child to school if you knew that there was a lion just down?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's sort of about a balanced approach to it. That's a conversation that could go on for
exactly, yeah. But I mean, I suppose even just in general, like, you're talking about these farming communities and stuff that are in the way of the elephant herd migration, is that they're not going to stop. The elephants have been going that way for hundreds of years and they're not going to stop. They'll just rip right through your property. So it's
exactly. And a lot of them, they farm like corn or maize.
Yeah.
In these areas, and maize is like candy to elephants. They love it.
Yeah.
And so when they see it, they're like, oh my god, it's happy days. And of course, to the farmer, he's just like, that's his livelihood, and so pretty seething about it.
Yeah, I mean, losing a lot of money. It's a big question, and I don't know how it can really be solved. And like I say, we can go on for hours, but I think one more place. I think we'll bring it to an end in now. But just in general, I want to talk about your experiences in Central Asia. So I'm looking here. You've been to Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So let's start with. I mean, one place I want to ask you about is Turkmenistan, because this is just one of the weirdest countries I've ever heard of in my life. It kind of sounds like it doesn't exist.
Yes, I think it's probably one of the hardest places to get into. So we were lucky because we got a 3-day transit visa.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Which meant that we could be there for 3 days, but we weren't allowed to be a second longer. Otherwise, we'd be probably sent back to Iran and then probably sent back to the UK from there, and it would be a complete nightmare.
Yeah. Did you cross over from Iran?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But Turkmenistan is it's so hard to explain because, as you say, not many people have ever heard of it, and it's in the middle of Central Asia, in between Uzbekistan and Iran. And they have a dictator who used to be the old president's dentist.
Yeah.
And he sort of built, the Ministry of Dentistry out of a giant molar. The whole of Ashgabat's basically brand spanking new and is like all white.
White marble, right?
What's that?
It's white marble, right?
Yeah, white Italian marble. Every car is white. And I think from this year, it's illegal to have any car other than a white car in Ashgabat.
Really?
Yeah.
I know that, like, for example, like cinemas are banned. Like there's plenty of, what is it, makeup's banned and things like that. And I know, like, the dictator, he shows up on TV, like, like throwing knives and things like that, just trying to look like a general badass on national TV. It's really strange.
Well, there's a photo on my Instagram that I took, and it's of the president. So they have these massive billboards of the president doing something. And one of them was him, like, they love their horses out there. So one of them's like with him sitting on a horse, and it's all very well photoshopped. It's like bright and, photoshopped behind.
Yeah.
Another one's like of him with two puppies, just holding them, being like, oh, he's such a sweet.
The loving guy, yeah, so strange. But what did you do over there?
It's just a mental place.
Yeah.
I can't even like describe it. It's just bizarre. You feel like you're in the Truman Show.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does it feel like, you're being watched and stuff all the time as well?
Yeah, so I was there and I took a like picture, and so during the day, in the parks, they're completely deserted.
Yeah.
They're sort of taking pictures, and then a guy comes up and goes, you're not allowed to take pictures of the buildings.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. And then he made me delete them. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There was a lot of weird stuff. So like, it's all very. A friend of mine, he has quite an interesting story about it because he was working out there for like the Central Asia Olympics.
Yeah.
And some guy came through the air vent, was hiding in the air vent and fell through, and just happened to fall right next to him.
Yeah.
Which they all came in and suspected my friend of, helping him.
Yeah.
No, this guy's just fallen in front of me. And so he was arrested on suspicion. And it just happened that the guy who fell through the vent and my friend had exactly the same birthday by complete coincidence. And so he ended up having to spend 3 days like detained, and then was like sent back to the UK and told he was never allowed to go to Turkmenistan again.
Jesus, wow, that's scary. What was the guy doing in the vent? We just kind of skipped over that. What was he doing in a vent?
I have no idea.
That's so strange. That's like something out of Always Sunny in Philadelphia or something. Someone just falls out of a vent.
No, exactly.
So what were you doing around in? So you started in Iran and I'm guessing ended in Kyrgyzstan, right?
So we were in Turkey, Iran, then into Turkmenistan, then Uzbekistan, and then Uzbekistan into Tajikistan, which was one of my favorites.
It looks beautiful down there. There's another dictatorship over there, I think, as well, right? But
Uh, maybe Tajikistan. I think Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan are democracies.
Kazakhstan's dictatorship is Sultan Nazarbayev over there. There's recent riots over there that he's managed to stay in power longer than he should be able to.
Right.
I think Tajikistan has a strange dictator as well. Actually, is one of these.
Yes, you're right. He does, because there's billboards of him as well.
Yeah.
I think, from what I remember being out there, people do sort of approve of him.
Oh yeah.
Well, from the sort of feeling I got to come across, there's not, public was sort of warming to him.
Yeah, I think as well, like I think Tajikistan, that when it came out of the former Soviet Union, that there was a lot of wars with Islamic terrorism and things like that. So I'm guessing like a strong man in those kind of in that country would probably be very beneficial for them, rather than them being in war for who knows how long.
Yeah, because I think, if I remember correctly, was when he sort of split up, what he did was all the sort of tribes or the ethnic groups, in order for them to, he sort of divided them up into the countries. So rather than split the countries into the ethnic groups, he would then cut the borders in between the ethnic groups or tribes.
Yeah.
So that they could never ever rise up against him.
Sorry, who did that?
I think it was Stalin.
Oh, really? I don't know. I don't know about that. I haven't heard that. That's a really interesting. You might be right. I know that he did really put a lot of pressure on those other Soviet states the Soviet states to fall in line. I know particularly in Georgia as well, he was quite bad. I think maybe you're right. Yeah.
Because I think in like Osh in Kyrgyzstan, they've had sort of ethnic like riots or battles, because they're all mixed.
Yeah.
Different ethnic groups, and it hasn't really what's the word, worked out.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. No, I'd never heard that before. We'll have to do some research into that, because I mean, I did my dissertation on Stalinism, so I know his atrocities, but I haven't heard that one. But I'm sure there's an even bigger list which I didn't even scratch the surface.
Well, if I've misquoted, please let me know.
No, I'll do some research into that, because it's very interesting. I honestly think that's a very plausible thing as well, and I think you're probably quite right.
As they say, divide and conquer.
Yeah, exactly. If they're divided, they can't conquer you as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So come on, we'll start winding down to a close. Any other amazing places you want to talk about that you feel worthy of a mention? Some of your favorite places?
Well, in the sort of last 3 years, I mean, I've been doing these sort of adventures, and I suppose I was gearing up for sort of bigger and more glamorous, well, not wrong word, bigger and more sort of expansive adventures. But last year I ruptured my spine, which is sort of a back seat.
Yeah.
With it, and so I mean, like, in terms of the future, I suppose I'm just trying to sort of give other people the opportunity to do these sort of adventures. If I like, I've set up a company called Zebra Adventures, which is in sort of my bio, which has the journals and diaries.
Okay.
And so the idea was to try and sort of take elements of each trip that I've done and combine into either a 4-day or a week-long adventure, starting in the UK and then progressing around the world. But I suppose another really fascinating place, not fascinating in a sense, but beautiful, is New Zealand.
Oh, really?
Which is probably worthy of a mention for anyone going. And I think New Zealand's probably had more than enough tourism, because everyone probably agrees with that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just about traveling off the beaten path as well. You know, the reason these places are so touristy is because they are so beautiful. They have these amazing spots. So, no, that's good. I would really like to go to New Zealand, actually.
Yeah, and
Um,
and Uzbekistan is actually quite upcoming, and it's really stunning for sort of history buffs and for sort of people interested in, you know, the Silk Road and the sort of start of the vast empires back in sort of the first century, 10th century, you know, sort of 1,000 years ago or so.
yeah. This, you know, since we were talking about Stalin, actually, I heard this really interesting story. Is one of the tombs at, I think it's Samarkand. One of them what had the tomb of sort of an ancient conqueror. I think it's called Tukum or something. Tulukum.
Yeah,
And the sort of the prophecy on the tomb or something was saying that whoever opens this tomb will meet a conqueror as scary as me, or you know, as deadly as me. And the person to break open that tomb was Joseph Stalin, and a few weeks later Hitler invaded the Soviet Union and he put the remains back. I think that's actually, you know, I'm pretty sure that's a true story, but how crazy is that?
that would be a great.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll need to
I know.
definitely double check that, but I'm sure that is a real. I'm sure that is a real story.
That would be unbelievable,
It
really.
would be right, especially it's so funny that someone like Stalin actually got scared about that and so, oh shit, I'm gonna put him back.
God.
Yeah. But anyway, John, we'll wind it down now. Thank you so much for your time and coming on. Where can we find your social media, your blog posts?
So my blog post is at Ziba Adventures, which is Ziba Adventures, and Ziba is sort of Persian for beautiful.
Oh, okay, cool.
It was beautiful adventures around the world. And then my sort of Instagram handle is just John Horsfall.
Cool.
It's Horsfall. So most of the stuff I do is on my website or on Instagram, and yeah, so that's probably the best place to find me.
Brilliant, awesome, man. Well, yeah, keep it up, keep up the adventures. They're really, really good. They're really cool. I'm super jealous as always. But yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. Well, hopefully speak to you in the future and can tell you more and hear more.
That sounds good. Yeah, it sounds good. Hopefully, get an expedition or something planned if I can keep up with you. All
No
right.
worries.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Follow at RSP Podcast on Instagram, and thank you, John.